You're listening to the Sent Ones podcast, where we help disciples of Jesus discover their calling, develop their skills, and get deployed to their mission.
All right. Well, can't wait to get into this conversation as we were pre-talking about it because, Josh, I know you've been we'd say on the field is maybe the language we'd use, been in India for 16 years. And I just wanted to hear kind of at the beginning, what was that like? Like when you started, maybe we'll hit the backstory another time of the calling and how you got there, but you just landed there. Like, what was that like for you as you just got started there?
Yeah. So, I say all the time, I found the dirty secret of the mission field real fast. And the dirty secret of the mission field is the same guy you are when you get on the plane is the same guy you are when you get off the plane. And for me, that wasn't really a great thing. And so, I thought that I was going to be this big bad missionary that came and saved everybody. But what actually happened was the Indian believers taught me how to follow Jesus. I mean, that's what really took place. I met men and women, man, that were so faithful to Jesus and loved him so much. They had been through horrendous things, some of them. I mean, horrible persecution and incredible difficulty, and yet they stayed faithful to Jesus anyway. I mean, I met men that their wives were killed for their faith, or widows who their husbands were killed, or couples who had lost their children because a persecution broke out and their children were killed in the midst of it. And I mean, just horrible things. I met these 16, 17-year-old kids, man, who said yes to Jesus knowing that they were going to get kicked out of their village, and they said yes anyway, And so I say all the time, their love for Jesus made my love for him look a whole lot more like liking him rather than loving him. And so I realized real fast, man, when I got here that, man, that miraculous transformation I was hoping for somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean just didn't happen, I guess the big epiphany for me is that when I saw men and women like what I just told you about, man, if we could reproduce disciples like that, we would shake nations with the gospel, right? If we could have men and women so faithful and courageous and bold, and willing to go through difficulty for the sake of the gospel, disciples like that, man. I mean, we could do anything that Jesus has called us to do with a handful of disciples like that. And then I looked in the mirror and looked at myself and realized that, man, those disciples are disciples worth reproducing. Am I a disciple worth reproducing? And I think that as we talk about being sent ones, it is a key question that we must ask in the mirror when we're looking at ourselves. Am I a disciple worth reproducing? If we multiplied people who looked like me, would that be a good thing or not? And Feeney, honestly, bro, I mean, you could ask my wife. The last thing South Asia needed was a couple hundred Josh Howards running around. Like that's the last thing they needed, man. And so the Lord really put the arrow directly in my chest, and basically I really felt him asking me several questions. And I would love, if you're listening right now, for you to really think through this, because I think they're so important to ask if you're thinking and praying about being a sent one, wherever it is, whether it's local or global or wherever. But these were the questions, if everyone in the church prayed the way that I pray, or fasted as often as I fast, or shared the gospel as often as I did, or loved the way that I loved, or spoke the way that I spoke, or looked like Jesus the way that I did, would that be a good thing for the kingdom or not? And there has been so many seasons throughout my life, man, where the last thing that would be good for the church would be to reproduce myself, or reproduce my prayer life, or to reproduce my gospel sharing across the nation. And it was deeply convicting for me at that point in my life to basically say, what is it going to take to really become a disciple worth reproducing? Now, we're never going to do that perfectly. And so we're never going to be in every single way a disciple worth reproducing in every area of our lives. But Paul was literally able to say to people, follow me like I follow Christ, like as I follow Jesus. And so look, basically what he was saying, Feeney, is look at how I live and live this way. And if you do, you will be following Christ if you just do what I do. Man, how high of a bar is that, bro? You know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
can you live up to that? Really?
That's
You know what I mean?
that came from that. Yeah, man.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's crazy. And so, I felt the Holy Spirit asking me, Josh, can you say that with integrity to somebody? Could
Mhm.
you look at somebody and say, hey man, just come and live with me and do what I do and you're going to be okay?
Mhm.
No, I couldn't say that. And I don't know that I still with integrity could say that. You know what I mean? I think that there's been seasons in my life where I could,
Mhm.
but I feel like there are seasons where I absolutely wouldn't. There are seasons, Feeney, that if you came in and lived with me, man, you would see incredible evangelistic activity taking place. You'd see great disciple making. You'd see great, all sorts of great things happening. And then there are seasons where if you came and lived with me, man, there'd be a lot of Zoom and there'd be a lot of sitting around and there'd be a lot of Netflix and
I'm
there'd be a
pretty
lot.
sure. So you're telling me Jesus and Paul did not use Zoom, and
I'm,
and
I'm not saying Zoom's bad,
yeah, that's why we're
um,
not using it. No.
but there would be a whole lot of board meetings and
Mm,
staff meetings and things that really aren't pushing the ball up the field very much. Um, and it just depends on the season of life. And so I was
mm.
convicted, man, deeply by these believers in South Asia to live more and more a life worth reproducing. And that's where really
Mm.
everything began to change for me, honestly.
So yeah, I wanted to ask how, because the change didn't happen over the ocean, and I'm assuming it didn't happen instantaneously. I mean, such good questions. I encourage anybody to re-listen to those as you're processing this. But how did that for you? How did that change kind of take place over? Was it months, years? Were there maybe key
Yeah.
markers or moments, or you kind of already shared some of those with the people you met? But we'd just kind of love to dig deeper there of how did that happen for you?
Yeah, it didn't happen over the ocean and it didn't happen overnight. And so,
Right.
and I'm still in process. I mean,
Yep.
and I feel like I take two steps back and one step forward all the time, but, uh, but yeah, I would say there were definitely some key markers. I met these faithful brothers and sisters in South Asia where I was able to learn tremendously from them. And so I would say one key component about that, like, is for people. So one, and that not everybody will have this, and so I want to give a caveat here. But one, if there's anyone at all around you who's living a life closer to what you want your life to look like when it comes to your spiritual life, just begin to spend more time with them. Ask if you could spend more time with them. Ask if they would mentor you in this area. Get around somebody, because this is a lot of this is more caught than it's taught. And so you want
Mm,
to be living life with people that are living this way. The truth is, though, not all of you listening will have anyone around you that's living this way. And so the second thing is, man, even if it's virtual or digital or somewhere across the world, I would try to find somebody who's living this way. And as a matter of fact, we've got a team of people globally that are living this way right now that we'd love to connect you with if you don't have anybody locally.
mm,
And the second thing would be, man, open up the word and look at how Jesus was
mm,
living. Look at how the disciples were living and do your best to begin to put those things into practice in your life every single day. I think those were the two big key components for me, Fanny. It was finding people living lives the way that, or at least closer to the way that I wanted to live, and was learning from them. And I got a couple incredible mentors in my life who lived this way consistently over the course of 20 or 30 years of their lives.
mm,
And they began to pour into me and coach me on what this actually practically looks like. And they did not live here with me. They weren't here locally. They were virtual mentors that I would meet with regularly that would help me and talk with me and guide me and coach me. But those were some key components, man.
mm,
Um, Also, fasting was a big piece. I had not fasted much in my life previously. I'd done it a little bit, but not a ton. And just the ongoing practice of fasting and prayer, and
mm,
really beginning to live a more consistently spiritually disciplined life. really helped shape things and change things pretty significantly as well. So I'd say those are a few of the key components there.
Those are great. And the challenge I want to give for anybody listening is you don't actually have to pay for the plane ticket to be able to do those. So wherever you are, you can find somebody locally or connect through online. Again, we'd love to do that. You can dig into God's word, of course. You can fast. So those are things that we can start to become, as Josh said earlier, a disciple worth reproducing right now, right where we're at. We don't need to buy the plane ticket to learn that lesson. So I just encourage all of us, maybe it's a small step we need to take, or maybe there's some bigger ones as you hear this. Start to take those steps today to become that disciple that's worth reproducing.
Yeah, and then one last thing before we close out this episode, guys, that if you're listening right now, the temptation that Satan is going to throw your way when you hear something like this is you must wait until you're a full disciple worth reproducing before you start doing any work. And that is a major lie of the enemy. And so I don't want you to believe that. It's not that we've got to get every area of our life in tip-top shape before we start practicing disciple making, or before we start sharing our faith, or before we start getting out there and making disciples. Because part of becoming a disciple worth reproducing is living out the disciple making principle. It is getting out there and sharing your faith and doing the work. All of those are components of this. And so as you're working on these inner life components, also be working on the outward life components as well, because all of them fit together. And so you don't have to wait until everything's perfect. Step out there in faith, get some stuff done, start doing something. And as you're doing that, you will slowly become a disciple worth reproducing in your life. It's a journey, and it's a marathon, not a sprint. It doesn't happen quickly, but over time, you will start getting into that habit and getting into that culture in your own heart where you will become a disciple worth reproducing. And at that point, man, there's nothing that can stop you. Hey guys, thanks for listening to the S.1 podcast. For practical next steps or more content like this, check us out at S1s.com, or you can subscribe with your favorite podcast provider. Hope to see you guys next time.